how actors came to Shakespeare when they started acting.
Yeah.
So like, sort of, what was your experience of it growing up? Was it something that you really liked? Was it something that you hated? Was it something that you were sort of mildly interested in? Or
yeah, I didn't really have any experience with it as a kid. I think and I wanted to act since I was 9, so it was in on the horizon, I suppose, of what I wanted to do, but I didn't give it any thought when I was going through school, and we'd really had very little experience of it at school other than reading it from books. Like in the classroom, I mean, sitting and everyone gets given a part and reading it. At least that's something. I mean, it's better than, I believe it has to be read aloud to be helpful, especially for children. It's helpful if people are reading it aloud, but I didn't really, it was awful, and nobody, it was just something I didn't really understand at that point. And at this point now too.
Yeah, me too. I think a lot of people are like that though. It's amazing how many...
Well, everyone, I mean, to be honest, most of the people we've spoken to, be it Zoe Wanamaker to Brian Cox, are in the same sort of situation of going, well, we still do these things, but we come to it like, where do we start? Kind of.
Yeah.
Because you've got to be shown, like anything. You've got to be shown what it is and how it works, and then you can...
See, I feel quite blessed in that I don't have... I've seen some really nice, good Shakespeare. I've seen a few productions that haven't been great, but I've only ever treated it just like another play. I've never thought about it as being particularly better or worse than any other kind of theatre or any other theatre. I've always just seen it as another play, and whereas I wouldn't go see a Sam Shepard play and think of it in a unique way. I would just want to see that play, and so I don't hold it in any high or low esteem really. Of course, we can talk about playing it, and it is a different ballgame when you start trying to act it. But in terms of seeing it, I've seen some really good stuff. I saw a good friend of mine, Douglas Henshaw, playing Macbeth in where was it? It was outside London. And I knew him really well, and I knew the play quite well. Macbeth is probably the Shakespeare play I know the best. And I went to see a good friend of mine doing it, and was blown away by him, and his kind of command of it. And so I've been lucky to see some really good Shakespeare plays. And I think I'm also lucky in that I don't come at it going. I come at it thinking, okay, this is a play, and I'm playing a part in that play, and how are we going to make that all work? I think it's true to say that. So I don't try and complicate it any further, or pressure yourself by going, oh shit, it's Shakespeare. I mean, it's not the same with the part, because playing Iago, you go, oh my god, it's Iago, and that's a kind of weight on your shoulders. Yeah. But the Shakespeare part of it, I think, is just, you've got to approach it like any other play. You've got to approach it as a story, in his case usually really good stories with interesting characters.
So why did you, coming to Othello, what made you want to do that?
I met Michael Grandage about doing something. I went to meet him for the first time before I went on my first big bike trip, and I said, when I come back, because I was a little bit, I'd made films and I'd been kind of filming back to back really for quite a long time, and I just got a bit tired of the process of it. I got a bit fed up with how long it takes, and the actual technicalities of filmmaking are quite tedious. The actual acting part is great, but the sometimes I was getting tired of it basically. So I decided to go and do this trip, and then I thought, when I come back, I want to go on stage. I'd done a play some years before at the Hampstead, and that came into the West End, called Little Malcolm and His Struggle Against the Eunuchs, but I hadn't been on stage for quite a long time, 5 years or something. So I knew it was time, because I was getting hungry for it, and I went to see Grandage, and I told him that I wanted to do something, but I didn't know what. I wanted to be on stage, and I said I missed the company feeling that I'd had when I did Little Malcolm with, we had a great small cast, and it was a wonderful feeling to be part of a company of actors, as opposed to in a movie. You don't really have that sense. And but I didn't know what it would be. So when I came back from the trip, he said, you should come in and see me, and he told me that he had the rights for Guys and Dolls in the West End, and that was something that I hadn't expected at all. I was thinking of some kind of contemporary little dark piece, maybe I get to kill someone or get killed myself, I don't know. And but instead it was all singing, all dancing, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, that sounds just what I was looking for, company feeling, it'll be fun and interesting. But at that point he said that he mentioned Othello to me for the first time, that it's something that we should think about doing with Chiwetel and myself in the future. And I don't know if it was to help me decide to do Guys and Dolls, but it was he said, it would be good to do this and then do that, and he was right. It was a nice contrast for sure. In fact, you don't really get a bigger contrast.
And was it that's not the first Shakespeare you've done in your career, is it?
I did As You Like It at drama school, and that was it. That's my only experience of playing Shakespeare. Yeah, As You Like It in my second year at drama school, and I played Orlando, and I learned, and it was good. It was good for me to do it. I think at the time I was quite lazy, and I threw myself into drama school. I liked the classes and everything, and I did, but I was quite laissez-faire about the whole thing. I treated it very much like I was going to be an actor anyway, and this was a way to do it. So I was quite cocky and a bit lazy, and they, cast me in the male lead in As You Like It, I think to scare the shit out of me, which they did. Right. We went to we rehearsed it and we took it to Germany to there was a drama school in Germany, in Hamburg, that was having its centenary or something. So they had this week of Shakespeare in their drama school with drama students from all over the world. There was Russian drama students and Czech Republic drama students, and it was quite extraordinary. And we were the only British representatives at this drama school festival of Shakespeare. We were supposed to be doing it right, and we watched all these incredible productions from all over the world, and some of them are really quite extraordinary, and we didn't feel that ours was, and we thought, well, ours should be, because we're doing it in English, and we should be in Shakespeare's tongue or whatever. But that was my experience of it. We did it there, and then we took it to Istanbul for some reason, and we played it there for a little while as well. Right. But when I started that, I found when we started reading it, I was completely at sea. I mean, I found reading it quite difficult. I've always found that about acting. I'm much better getting up and trying it than talking about it or analysing it on the page. I find it quite difficult. And with Shakespeare, I found it almost impossible. I mean, I kind of looked for the sense of it, but I was too young and too arrogant, and I didn't quite work the meaning of it all out. And I remember when we did our read-through, in the Studio 3 or whatever in Guildhall, and we're all sitting around, and my hands were shaking because I hadn't really prepared it enough. And you can't just read Shakespeare without some kind of preparation, because you have to really work at what it all means, and what it means to you. More important, I think that's quite important. Not necessarily. I don't think there's like a right or wrong with a lot of Shakespeare. You've got to find out how it connects. What sense it makes to you, which is why there can be such great discussion about it in rehearsals. I think it means this. Well, it could mean that, and there are books about those cheap books about what it should be. Yeah. But I often disagreed with them. I looked at them and went, I don't think that's what it means at all. So I'm jumping all over the place. But when in Guildhall, when we sat and did that read through, I really was completely lost. And I felt like a fraud, and everyone else seemed to be really making sense of it, but all I could do was carry on. So I'd carried on, and I suppose it made me, once we started reading it, I realised I had a long way to go. So I started working on it harder. But at some point, I think it was in the second or third week of rehearsals, something clicked, something bit in, and I started flying with it, and I remember that feeling of the first rehearsal where it happened, of just getting it, going, it tastes really good in your mouth. The words really, it's like a taste almost, that just works. And once that happens, you're flying with it, and then it's a joy, and you can't imagine why you would ever do a play not in Shakespeare's text, you know, because
Yeah.
it makes such sense in a way.
So was that something that you found, or was did the teachers help, or whoever's directing it, or
No, I don't think nobody said it would happen,
you just
or
found your way through
it just suddenly happened for me, and I really enjoyed it. Then I don't know. It's because it's so brilliant. It's because it's so brilliantly written, and I think it's very much to do with not necessarily his words, but the thoughts, you know, that he links together with his words. Once you've got, I mean, that's how you've got to learn it. I think that's what makes it much easier to learn, is having once you clearly understand in your interpretation of the character what it all means, what Iago's referring to here or there. once you get all those thoughts, and once you get all that understanding behind the text, then it's about then you're going from one thought to the next, and that's kind of his beauty. Shakespeare's that the thoughts are so beautifully put together, you know. And I've seen recently. Somebody sent me a script. Well, I won't mention it because it probably just have come out when your documentary comes out. But there's someone about to shoot a very famous Shakespeare play in Hollywood at the moment, and I was sent the script to see if I would like to be involved in it, and it wasn't Shakespeare's script. There were little bits of dialogue from his, but a lot of the dialogue wasn't there. And I thought, well, you can't say it's Shakespeare anymore because it's not. Yes, the words are all Shakespeare's words, but they're not followed by the right thought before or after. You can't take a little bit out, and that'll do that for that speech. You know, we'll make this 20-line speech into 5 lines. It doesn't work like that. It's not. It's not the words. It's the thoughts behind it. You know.
So with that in mind, how do you think other people have handled that? Because obviously Baz Luhrmann, he cut down quite a lot for Romeo and Juliet, but there was still kind of quite a strong sense.
I think you can make I think you can make cuts, because we cut. You know, Michael Grandage made cuts in Othello, but
just has to be good.
Well, I suppose it has to be very good. I mean, it's if you looked at the script, you'd cut your wrist. You know, it's terrible. I mean, whereas if somebody's making informed cuts in a play in the script and putting it on stage, then you know, there is a difference. There is a difference, and I think Baz did it really, really well. I mean, he did it really, really well, because it was extraordinary. It was an extraordinary production. I mean, if you went to see that on stage, you'd be really chuffed. And the fact that it was a movie and it was so blinding was amazing. But I felt like it really was Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah,
totally. You know, he didn't ever kind of pull away from that.
Yeah.
So coming to Othello, playing Iago, how can you remember how that was coming into it?
Yeah, I was properly terrified. I mean, the nearer it came, I became really, really quite perversely frightened about it, and I did an awful lot of work beforehand, which is something I tried to learn all of it before we started, and I didn't succeed. I just couldn't. I found it so difficult to stand and learn it on my own. You know, everything else I've ever done, I've learned, you know, in rehearsals or from doing it, from getting up on your feet and doing it. I find that you know, it's quite effortless to learn lines when you're doing it that way. But standing in my living room on my own with a script, trying to just learn Iago's speeches and soliloquies, and I found it very hard. And I found that it was a very clever way to get me to do all those jobs around the house that I hadn't been doing for 5 or 6 years. I was like, I've got to do that.
Yeah.
So just to
Then
get
somebody
away from
outside
it.
the window.
And then it gets closer and closer and closer.
I think I better go and get some crisps from the off license, you know, whatever it was. I find that I was very easily distracted because it's all linked with fear, and I became quite scared about it. And then I went into rehearsals, and the first day I'd gone through all of the soliloquies with Michael on my own, and we'd gone into the Donmar maybe 2 or 3 days time, with 2 or 3 afternoons maybe, and we'd gone through it. And as soon as I got up on my feet with him there, because I know and loved Michael, you know, and as soon as I got up on my feet with the script in my hand, even though I felt like I knew them, still with the script in my hand, and walked around the space a bit there in the Donmar, saying those words, I suddenly felt that everything would be all right. Until I got into the rehearsal room, and the first day of rehearsal was very exciting, and it was exciting to meet everybody. But once Michael starts, you meet everybody, and then he gets everybody out of the room. Everyone goes away. All the people that came down to have coffee with the actors and designers and people from the Donmar Theatre, and they all disappeared. And then you're left, and he just has the people from scene 1, act 1, scene 1. So there we all sat down. We started reading through it, and I was quite on top of the meaning of it all, for me, I felt. And I enjoyed very much when somebody thought there was maybe a different take on it, and I like that discussion quite a lot. And like I say, I'm usually reluctant to talk too much about it. I like to get up and do it more. But in fact, and with Shakespeare, I find that it's really enjoyable to pick through it, and you deepen your understanding of it. And some things you don't decide on until later on. Some things might be this way or that way. But when we got up and started, and he immediately gets you up on your feet to do it, to start walking through it. And I felt awash and at sea. And a lot of it is to do with being, working in film most of the time where there isn't any rehearsal. I've never really fully understood why there should be the difference, but you can't get up and just do a play without rehearsal. You need the rehearsal. Whereas if you were to be shooting it, I like to think that I would be able to do that. And so I suppose as the film actor in me, when I was in the rehearsal room, suddenly panicked because it wasn't. I'm used to getting things like that, looking at the thing, the words, and then making it work on camera immediately. And that doesn't happen, like I say, and certainly not with Shakespeare. So when I was standing there, my bottom fell out of my world, and I went, "Fuck! That's it. I'm not going to be able to do it." And Chiwetel has played Othello before a couple of times, and he looked like he might be able to go on and do it that night,
right.
on the first day of rehearsal. And so I was opposite somebody who really had he was already trying stuff out, and I was literally still trying to just get the words out of my mouth. So it was quite frightening and complicated. And within 3 days, I worked myself into a complete panic, really, and thought that maybe I'd made a mistake, and thought maybe that I can't cut. I won't be able to do this, and how am I going to get to a point where I feel confident again? I lost my confidence, and I have a friend who's a hypnotherapist, and I went to see him. He said, "Just come and see me." And I phoned him up, and I went, "I'm shitting myself, and I'm not able to see the words in rehearsal for fear. I feel like I'm kind of looking at some blurry thing in my hands because I'm so convinced that I'm not going to be able to do it." And I went to see him, and I did a session with him, and the next day I came in and I allowed myself to not be good at it yet, which is what I wasn't doing. I was trying to perform Iago in the rehearsal room on day 3, and I'd forgotten why you have a 5-week rehearsal period. You have to allow yourself not to be very good at it, and I wasn't allowing myself not to be very good at it. And I was already projecting being on stage with however many people in the Donmar, 300 people looking at me going, "Oh dear," and I had to get rid of all of that in order to allow myself to be not very good at it, to get better at it,
And is that because you normally come to a role ready to go, as you say? Like if it's film from that point of view, you come with it because you have to bring your...
If it was film, you probably wouldn't... Very often you don't have any rehearsal at all. I mean, you'll rehearse on set before you shoot the scene, but there's no rehearsal period as such. And generally I've found if there is, it's usually just to make the director relax a bit. It's to let him see it or her see it and to relax them. It's not very helpful for the acting. I wouldn't be able to tell you why that is, but in my experience, rehearsing on film is usually a bit of a waste of time, really. But in the theatre, so I have to always retrain myself to remember that it's all right to not be, that it's a process and it's stepping stones, and that I was in good hands with Michael Grandage and my other cast members in Othello, where where together you build you work through the scenes, and then when you come back to them for the second time, you're building on that, you're building till you start to run them at the end of week 4 or something, and you're standing at the side with Michael as well. He doesn't let you. You're not involved in any scenes that you're not in.
Really?
You're not there.
Right.
So when we started running the play, at the end of the 4th week, you're seeing a lot of the scenes that you for the very first time. You know, the ones you're not in, which for Iago isn't many.
Yeah. But that's a good thing for an actor to remember, a young actor or any actor, that you are allowed to, dealing with that fear, you are allowed to be not very good. You are allowed to not know what you're doing for a while.
I really have to have it drummed into me. I have to be reminded that you're not going to be able to perform that play on the first day of rehearsals, and nor what would you do if you could? What would be the point of the rehearsals? Yeah. So it's a process, and it's really a beautiful process. I love it more, I think, than anything. Right. I think it's my favourite part of acting at all is the rehearsal room, because I love it. I find it so exciting to be amongst actors like that, and it really is only in the theatre where you get that kind of camaraderie, or you get that kind of discussion, because you really are getting up. You're going at the back of your mind. You're going to be on stage with these people, where there has to be a level of support for one another that's beyond anything else we know. It's so important that you're attuned with each other, and I love that. I love lunchtimes. I like actors with their sandwiches and newspapers, and I love it. The exploration of text and scenes in a rehearsal room is as satisfying as anything, really.
And did you use anything more different to how you would normally attack a script and a character in Shakespeare to find Iago? Like that, how did you go about finding that character?
I think when I first spoke to Michael about it, and I have seen Othello, but I didn't go near any of the movies or anything. I didn't watch any of the filmed Othellos before approaching the role. Oh, maybe I did. Maybe I watched Laurence Olivier's one. Anyway, I didn't. There was no kind of classic Iago in my mind that coloured the way I was going to play it. Really, only that I knew generally he's kind of evil personified, and there's an awful lot of, evil playing the bad guy, playing the villain, and I didn't want to do that particularly. I wanted him to be evil, because there's no question that he is, but I wanted it to come from a place of. The thing about bad guys is they don't walk around feeling that they're the bad guy. They're living their lives the way they are for a reason. So I was more interested in that, and also what Michael and I discussed the fact that everybody's fooled by him. Yeah. Everybody calls him Honest Iago throughout the whole play. Yeah. It's honest this, honest Iago, good fellow, blah blah blah. Yeah. And so I thought that was really key. To be able to fuck everybody up so badly is only because he's in there and nobody really notices him. Yeah. So I wanted to make that right, and I thought the windows into his true self are the soliloquies. That's where we get to see the truth about it, because he lies to everybody all the time, but he doesn't lie to the audience. I think in the soliloquies he's got to be telling them the truth about how he feels, and so that's where we started, I think, and then it was a case of finding my way through to really by being up on my feet. I mean, you know, once you've gone through that initial talking through the and understanding all of the flavors and colors in his writing, then it's about getting on your feet and doing it, and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And for me, that moment where it clicked happened quite late on. It might have been in the 4th week, and it was when I was doing the moment with Rodrigo, where we're down the front, and I'm saying, "Put money in your purse. Put money in thy purse." The "put money in thy purse" speech to him to convince him to join him in this plan. That when I was doing that one day, it clicked in, and I realised while I was doing it that it was working. You know what I mean? Or that you could feel that it was like something. It was as if something had. I was less involved in it. It was working on its own. Right. You know what I mean? I don't know. Right.
Yeah, it was a bigger thing. It was kind of the whole thing had taken control of itself.
Yeah. If suddenly you think. Suddenly I felt like this is how it might be on stage. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
this is now a performance level as opposed to a rehearsal room level, maybe.
Because that's the thing that we went to see it, and that's the abiding thing that I thought is that I trusted this guy, and the couple of times I've seen it, I remember the first time I saw it, the guy was no different with all the other characters than he was with us. So you thought, well, it kind of made them seem a bit foolish because they buy it.
Yeah.
And everyone has to go to this guy and say, look, I'm having this problem, help me out. They go to Iago, don't they?
Yeah.
And so if he's like this oily villain, they wouldn't do it. It just sort of makes a mockery of the whole thing, and it makes Othello seem a bit dim for
trusting him so much.
For trusting him so much. Whereas in this production, that was completely opposite. You would go to this guy totally,
right,
and say, I've got this problem. What do I do?
Yeah.
They all seem to go to him and say, what shall I do? What shall I do?
Yeah. It made more sense of him to me as well. I felt like I really quite slowly I kind of got to understand him. I've kind of met characters that are a bit like that who don't really notice, and there was something very important about his, the play starts with him complaining about not getting the lieutenantship. It starts there. Those are the first things Shakespeare gives us, is this other guy, Cassio, got the lieutenantship that he felt he deserved. And it's, and it's about, I like that, it's about, there's a class thing. I felt like he was out of his depth class-wise as well. I was quite happy to play him in my Scots accent, maybe in that time in the courts, it might have made him a bit lesser in class. It all made sense of his jealousy and his feelings of dissatisfaction with everything.
And I think everyone understands that as well, don't they? That's the great thing about that. People understand being passed over for at one point in their life.
Right,
maybe not all the time, but just, everyone has a reference to that.
Yeah.
So if you kind of give people that, they key into that character early on, and then you kind of got them, really.
And it sort of reminded me of that thing of where, when you're on the news, the people go, the mass murderer next door, he was just a normal guy.
Nice guy, quiet guy.
No one really did, got on with it, and yet he was doing all these horrific things.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it even more
shocking,
really. And what about like sort of the iambic pentameter and the verse and all that? How did that sort of get in the way? Did that come up? Did that?
We didn't.
I think that's what puts a lot of people off.
We didn't talk about it, even at all, in the rehearsals, and I don't remember talking about it when I did it at drama school either. I don't know that so I've no experience of like Peter Hall. And Peter Hall came in one night. That was a moment.
Oh, really?
So I was I was on stage, doing it because our play started. It was really dark, and the Donmar's tiny. It's like this. Yeah. So it's very dark at the beginning. Thank goodness, because it let me be able to start the play, and then gradually through the scenes, it gets lighter and lighter. And by the scene before the interval, you can see every face in the theatre. And I was doing a moment with Othello, and I turned around and went, "It's Peter Hall." Okay, carry on. And then for the rest of the night, I was thinking, when am I breathing in? When am I breathing out? Because I know that he's quite keen on the iambic pentameter of it all, whereas Michael didn't. We didn't worry about it at all. And I think that so then you start, and that might be right or wrong. I don't know. I've no experience of kind of being drilled in it, so I wouldn't be able to talk about it. But for me, I think the breathing and the where you breathe and the rhythm of it comes out of the fact that it's so well written, and it comes out of the sense of it, that you're trying to make. You've taken a breath to be able to make your point with the lines, and somehow that becomes. I think maybe at some point during rehearsal, there might be a couple of passages that you don't get to the end of, and you think, okay, I would like to get to the end of that. But mainly, I wasn't thinking of it technically, and certainly never on stage, other than the night Peter Hall was in, was I thinking where I'm breathing, because I should hope that I would just be thinking,
exactly
where
which is a sort of argument against it, really. I mean, that's all the argument you need, really.
But then again, if you're but it might. I can't say that it's a good or bad idea because I've no experience of doing it that way, and I wouldn't. It might be very key for somebody else, and if you've done it. All I've heard from people who've worked with Peter Hall is that at first it feels so alien, and everyone resists it and feels like they can't act like this, and it's horribly confining, and then all of them I say, but then you realise that it's the only way to do Shakespeare, and so something about it works for them. So I couldn't say, really. I mean, that's another thing about Shakespeare is the soliloquies, that you're called upon to speak to the audience. There's one thing I really loved about Jude's Hamlet is, that he did that really well. He really chose people in the audience and fucking spoke to them. I think that's really. I tried to do that, whether I did it or not, to the same effect or not. One night, somebody's phone rang in the middle of my soliloquy. And I know on that instance that I really nailed them, I was in the middle of something and the phone rang and I went, they were up there on the left, they'll probably remember, they'll know who they are. And I nailed them with a look, and then carried on. It was perfect. And it was quite an angry moment. It couldn't have been better timed.
What is that about the mobile phone theatre?
Switch your fucking telephones off. Come on.
Yeah.
It's relentless.
How hard is that to remember?
Especially in the Donmar. I mean, the people are right there, aren't they?
Terrible. It's terrible. I have to, and there was one of my most important performances of this was when my daughter Esther came to see the play. I have 3 children, and my 2 little ones, I have a little adopted girl and my other little Esther, and they're both 8 and 7 now. And at the time they were 6. When was it? 2? It was last year. No, they were 7. Just 7 year, probably, yeah. or yet to be 7. So they came to see the last dress rehearsal because it's Shakespeare. It's a long play, and the little ones, maybe they wouldn't sit through it. Yeah. And so my wife came and brought them, and they watched the first 3 or 4. They watched up until Rodrigo's crying, and I'm saying put money in that purse, and then she took them away. And then, but Esther, my little Esther, really wanted to see all of it. It had touched something in her, and she was fascinated to see the play. And it was more than just, I think, the fact that her daddy was in it, And so Ev, my wife, brought her back to watch the whole thing, one matinee, quite near the end of the run. And I've never, before I had a wee look out and I saw her sitting there next to her mummy, 6 or 7, she had a little headscarf on, and she was tiny, she was quite wee, and in amongst the audience. And I realised that maybe this was the most important performance for me of all of them, because she was there. And I came out on stage, and it meant everything to me that she was there. I can't describe it. It was so focused over there that my whole performance, was just aimed into this little head. And somebody started eating Maltesers in the front row. This girl, like a 20-year-old girl, right in the front row. And now it's too small, the Donmar, to be able to block it out or something. You can't, and it's rude, and people don't realise that what do they think, you can't hear it, and passing the packet back and forward.
Or toffees that they pull and they do the thing.
Like it's a cinema. That's
so I had to go over. I just kind of, again, in the middle of, no, it wasn't somebody else's, during the second scene in the court, I kind of just wandered over and had a look at her like this, and then looked at her Maltesers, and then looked back at her like that, until she realised that no, this was me looking at her and her chocolates,
Yeah.
Because it was distracting my performance from my little Esther,
Yeah.
Who loved it, by the way, who really got something out of it, at that age, and because the story is very clear, because I think if Shakespeare's done very well, the story is clear, and
that was an incredibly clear performance. It's probably my favourite Shakespeare I've seen, I think.
Yeah.
To be fair.
Oh, that's nice. I think that's one of the wonderful things about Michael Grandage and that space, is that to do Shakespeare in that that intimate little place where you really are pulling people into the middle of the play. I think in the Donmar, that's the beauty of it. You feel like you're in the play, and he really only directs to find the truth of the play. I don't think there was anything tricksy about it. There's never any, sound effects there's not anything tricksy in a dramatic way, other than just serving the story and the text. The sight and the lighting was extraordinary, because they managed to create different spaces with the light almost. It's really beautiful.
And there was the thing of the water dripping. Did it start with water?
There was water along the back of the stage.
That's right, yeah.
And it sort of immediately said,
and there was drips into it.
Venice.
Yeah.
Which is sort of, I don't really associate Othello with Venice, even though it is.
It starts there.
But yet there was this thing of,
it
set the atmosphere perfectly.
And it's nice, they had a little, the kind of drops coming in, and then the light kind of rippling on that famous Donmar wall, the famous black Donmar wall.
The black wall, yeah.
What about the Hamlet thing you did, the production, the Globe? Wasn't it factory? Didn't you do a factory theatre?
No, I'm very keen on that, but I'm not. I was never involved in it.
Oh right.
You're a patron of them.
Yeah. I met Alex Hassel I met him by accident in the Globe. Funnily enough, I was working on a film called Incendiary, and we'd been shooting near the Globe, and they'd given us a dressing room there to get changed in or something. And after I'd got changed, I'd finished, I was walking back through the Globe, and Alex passed me, and I'd seen him in that television show Bonkers, you know, that he did. And I really liked him in it, and I stopped to say that I'd enjoyed his work in that. And he started to tell me about the factory and the what they were doing, and I was intrigued. And so I went to see their Hamlet down one Sunday night. Did you interview him?
No, we haven't spoken to me yet, but I saw.
Well, I'll tell him you should speak to you, because I think it's really phenomenal
it's actually finding the time, because he's
those guys,
yeah, because I know. I thought I knew. His name's gone from my head. The other guy who started the company with us,
James or something.
James maybe. But Alex I saw Alex do Hamlet in the Hackney Boys Club or something. It just so happened he was voted in that night, and he was incredible, I have to say.
Yeah,
incredible.
But it's great. I love the idea of it, and I went to see it while we were performing Othello, and it was really interesting because they'd come in to see ours, and then I went with another actor from Othello, Alistair, to see theirs on a Sunday night. And it was lovely to see Shakespeare whilst you're performing in it, because there's something, you're so seated in the language that you get so much more out of it somehow than you know, you're so attuned to it. And I just loved it. I loved the whole idea about it. I wanted to do ours the next day without costumes and, you know, having people in the audience giving us props and stuff. Yeah. But when I saw him, Alex played Hamlet, and you know, everyone brings in a prop, and the actors take props if they want for moments. And when he did this speech, what a piece of work is a man? Is it what a piece of work is a man? Yeah. When he started that speech, he disappeared behind the seating. And the lovely thing about that is that the Act 1, you were in the audience and they're on stage, and then Act 2, you're on stage and they're in the audience, and Act 3, you know, you're in the bar, and they play it all over the space wherever they've got. They don't have a set, they don't have costumes or anything, and they just have these props that the audience bring in. So when he started the speech, what a piece of work is a man, he came out from behind the seating with a baby in his arms, in his hands, like this, and he held this baby out. He said, what a piece of work is a man. And he did that whole speech with a baby in his. It was the most moving thing I'd ever seen. It was beautiful. I loved it. I thought it was great, and I thought the idea behind it is really strong. You know, you're watching this very clever idea, the lack of structure to it, the fact that it's cast that night in front of your eyes, the props, everything about it is a wonderful idea. But more importantly than that, I felt like I totally saw Shakespeare's play. I felt that it was so true to. They made such sense of his text of that play. It transcended the idea of, you know, which is what I thought was so clever about it. But I also like the fact that it was so. I really like the fact that it was kind of underground, and it was a really young crowd, and it was Shakespeare. You know, it was exciting. So they're taking it to New York. Did you know they've got some dates in New York? They're trying to raise $40,000 or something in order so that they can take it over there to play in New York City for a while. Which is great. Yeah, good luck to him, because I think it's a wonderful concept, and I think he's a driven, clever young man. You know.
They just did York, actually. I think the actual theatre in York about 2 nights ago. And apparently, some people bought some water pistols, so it turned into this crazy kind of like festival of wet, basically.
that was a bit like Filter. I don't know if you saw the Filter production of Twelfth Night.
Didn't know.
No. Was that was the one at the Tricycle? No.
Yeah, and it was on at the same time as the Donmar one that's just happened with Derek Jacobi, and that was the same. Like, they brought out, there was a band on stage, and they all played instruments, and they brought out pizza at one point, and they were passing pizza around the audience, and it was just like a kind of rock concert, and they kind of really pulled it about a bit, and you sort of had to know the story a little bit But even if you didn't, it was just a great experience. And you think you can do that much with Shakespeare. You don't have to be kind of just one way.
Yeah.
You can kind of pull it about a bit. And
No,
it still,
absolutely, yeah.
still works.
Yeah.
Would you do any more of it? Would you do other things you want to?
I would. I'd like to play Macbeth because I think it's such a great play, and I'd like to play Iago on film. I'd like us to film it. We talked about it at Grandage and Chiwetel and I. It's quite difficult, and especially at the moment, to probably fund a Shakespeare movie.
Yeah.
I think it could be done very effectively in a very cheap way. They used to film them. A lot of the old national productions were filmed, and Olivier's Hamlet on film is fantastic. And his Othello's great, and they're not expensively done. Then I think you might have to. You could do it in a relatively cheap way, and I'd like to very much. We recorded it for radio towards the end of our run, and that was interesting. Just putting it in a different medium, and I haven't done radio for years and years and years, but taking your performance on stage and recording it for radio is a completely different ballgame. But God, you're so on top of it that you can try anything out, and to put it on film, I think would be great. To take the soliloquies and really play them, on film would be just a treat, because they're almost like Shakespeare's close-ups. You're coming in tight, and and there you can really speak to yourself, and I think it would be really spectacular to make the movie of it. So I'd like to do that, Macbeth, and I don't have a desire to play. I'm too old really to play Hamlet. I don't have a desire to do that. But Macbeth, I'd like to have a crack at. I just worked with Polanski this year, and he shot.
Did you?
He shot. His Macbeth is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievably good. Really good.
What was he like? Jesus.
Yeah. I've just been ADRing with him all morning.
Oh, really?
No, come on, try it like this. He's so funny. He's a trip. He's really, really. He's a legend for a good reason,
And is he a director who works with the actor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He goes, no, why are you doing it like this? You would do it like this.
All right.
No, but in a really good way. He pushes you. But again, he's always looking for what makes him extraordinary. Is he's only looking for the truth, of how something plays and how something looks, and he'll obsess over the background and move books around in the bookshelves so he's got it exactly right, even if they're deep background, and he won't shoot unless the light matches. Everything's details, and there's no sense of. Often in film, you're acting against the clock in a way, because there's a script supervisor literally with a stopwatch going, and you see her whispering to the director, "That's 45 seconds," and in his perfect cut on paper, he wants that scene to be 30 seconds. Right. So you come in, and there's lots of fancy ways that film directors will ask you just to do it quicker, so that they don't have to say the words "do it quicker." Right. But with Polanski, there's none of that. You play it so that it's real, and that's all that matters, And that's a great. That's a nice feeling as an actor. Where you're not feeling you have to rush through everything,
I didn't realise there was a time. I could understand getting all the shot lists and all the rest of it. I didn't realise there was a time thing.
Well, sometimes, not all the time.
Makes sense. Yeah.
But sometimes they've timed it out in their head. Sometimes, yeah. I mean, often the script supervisor will always time the take, or so they know roughly how long that scene will at least plays before they edit.
Right. What did you find difficult about making the films that you've made, documentaries I'm talking about? Because this one has been, as we said, it's like 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's a fucking monster, having done it just ourselves.
Yeah. Well, good for you. What I did was me and Charlie came up with our idea, and then we immediately went looking for a producer to help us make it, and hand over all of the nuts and bolts of it to, so that we could, although we never let go of the idea, and we fought, when we met lots of producers, and we ended up with our producer Russ and David, because they were the people that went, how do you want it made, as opposed to, well, we'll make it like this. We didn't want somebody to tell us how we should do it, but somebody that would help us make it the way we felt it should be made. And then when we went looking for money, you know, there's lots of TV companies and people who were saying, we're trying to impose other ideas into it. This voting off thing that has to be in
really?
Yeah, that one person said, well, there should be challenges as you go around the world and a score in the corner of the screen about who's got the most points. And at the end, when you get to New York, if you get to New York, whoever's lost has their motorcycle crushed in a crusher. We went, thank you for your time.
Right,
It's like if that bike's got me from A to B, that is not going in any
That's
crusher.
not going to crush it. Are you fucking crazy? So
But that gimmick thing.
So
is
and all I ever thought was that, you know, we'll try and ride our bikes from London to New York, and whatever happens in between those two events happens, and we'll shoot it, and that'll be it. That's the story. That's the book. That's the TV show, and that's what we did. You know, we didn't set, and the only thing we set up was goat polo in Kazakhstan, where they played polo with a headless goat carcass, because it was off season, and we wanted to see that. You know, if you're in Kazakhstan, you want to see people playing with a headless goat. So we asked them to put on a kind of display match for us, which they did. But that, apart from that, everything else was just as it happened. You know.
That part of the was it the Bone Road across from
At Road of Bones.
Oh God, that
was nuts. Yeah,
it's awful, wasn't it?
Oh, it's fantastic. But in a way, it's like all adventures. You know, it's the bit that actually you look back on and you go, oh, that was wicked. Yeah. I mean, riding and then stopping and putting your tent up on the Road of Bones, because everything for hundreds of miles either side of you is marsh. It's all it's frozen tundra during the winter, and for those couple of months of the year it goes to bog, so you can't walk on it. This road is all there is, and even that's full of holes and potholes, and so at night you stop and you put your tent up on the road, and it doesn't get dark. It stays light till more or less all night. Really, you're so far north, and it's telling bad jokes and kicking stones around, and Claudio, our cameraman, it's perfect because he doesn't stop. He's Swiss German, and he is like a Swiss clock. He just fucking works and works, shoots. But you're right. No, what happened with us is in America. You know, once we got out of Siberia and we got to Alaska, we went through Anchorage and Canada, and then everyone just got really tired. And so when we crossed the States, there just wasn't so much footage. And also we were kind of battered across it. It was less interesting to us than Siberia had been, obviously. We should have shot more there, and it's the most common criticism of Long Way Round is that, you know, what happened to America, there wasn't very much about that, and it's true. But mainly because of that, because we got really fatigued and just got the camera out less. Yeah. Shakespeare. I'm trying to think what else is interesting.
Those two parts are massive parts to have to do night after night.
Well, it was completely exhausting. I mean, what's lovely about the theatre is that it takes over your. Yeah. I think it's kind of the nice thing about acting is you can step out of all your responsibilities when you're making a film or a play, and I like to work all the time. So for me, I think I'm just someone who runs away from all responsibility. So I don't have to answer my phone because I'm doing a play, or I can't possibly meet that person for that job because I'm doing a film right now. You know, I don't have to. I'm hands off.
Actually, you did say that when you were on the motorbike as well.
Yeah, lack of responsibility.
Fucking agents.
I love my agent. I would never put my phone down on her. But doing it twice in a day is something that you can't describe, you know. And at the Donmar we played Monday to Wednesday in the evenings, and then Thursday we had a matinee, and Saturday we had a matinee. So you're doing 5 Othellos in 3 days, and it's barbaric. I mean, by the time you're in that last one on a Saturday night, you're in but it's brilliant because you are quite lost in it. You know, it's a funny moment at the end of the play. You know, I'm handcuffed and I'm bound, and I was on my knees looking up at Othello doing his final speech at the bed with the audience around behind me like that, and breathing, and I'm all angry and pissed off, and I've said my last line. I'm looking at him, and there's a moment where you go, got there, you know, and it's been a great show or it's not been a great show, whatever your feelings are, but there's always that moment of have the satisfaction of got to the end of the play, and then that slow realization that you were just in an hour, you have to do it again. And you think, whose idea was this? This can't be a sensible thing to do. So But I've always quite enjoyed it in a sick sort of way. There is something quite fantastic about that second show. I always enjoy matinees. I think they're quite. I've never treated a matinee with any less or gumption than that's not really a word, but I've never treated them with any less gumption than the evening shows. I think but that second show, when you've already done it, it's kind of, you're flying at night and you're tired, so there's some interesting things happen, you know. I always think they're quite interesting shows. You can't judge yourself very well anymore because you do get really tired. I mean, just for Chiwetel and I, we were very rarely off the stage in that play, and huge big scenes go by, but that's something about the plays themselves. I found doing Othello, you'd arrive at the theatre, and I always get there really early. I have a lot of warm up. I go through a lot of the text. We always warm up together as a cast. I think it's really important to warm up on stage in the space you're going to play, and together, and we would play silly games, and we really took it seriously as a company, which I've been fortunate only ever to do when I've been on stage. I love that. And then you go off, and then you get into your own space, and you can be really up for it or not so up for it, or worried about it, or you feel like your voice is going, or you can have any number of worries about that show that night, or not. You can feel fantastic, but none of it matters. It's there's something other than you or your problems or your feelings that takes over when you start the play. And I've been feeling 110% like ready to go and step on there, and immediately I'm having a great show. You fluff a word or something that throws you, or something in the audience happens, or you just don't feel it, or and you feel it, you're having to act it more than feel it, and then other nights you can be really worried about it, and feel that your energy's low, you're tired, you're losing your voice, and you get on stage and you go, "Bow, fuck, it's off." You're not in control of any of it. It's really interesting.
It just works.
It just works, yeah.
Did you have a massive come down after that? Because I don't know what it's like with film, doing them on the scale and speed that you do them, because you do so many. That do you ever have a come down from that, the same as when you finish working? Or
what happens after?
I used to more than I do now, to be honest. I think now I've because I used to get really the blues after the end of a film and stuff, because it's you've met a whole bunch of people you like, and you disappear from each other's lives. Maybe it's just something you get used to after a while. And I found on this, when we were approaching the end of the run, I was completely ready for it to. It felt like I'd got what I was looking for out of it, if you like. And we talked about doing it again, maybe take it to America, everything, and I just couldn't find I didn't have a reason to go and do it again. I didn't feel like I had any more to get from it. And Michael's asked me, he said, do you think you understand do you think you fully understand him? Have you got all of your understanding of Iago? Do you know why he does everything? I said, I don't think you could ever say that. I don't think you could ever say that you fully understand all his motivations, I think, because he's so complicated. And I said, but if I think about playing him again, I don't know what I would be trying to get out of it, because I feel like I really got everything I wanted out of it. It was a fantastic experience, and I was so blessed to be in it with the company of actors I was with, because they were great. And we had not only on stage but backstage and in the rehearsals, and we became really tight unit. And it was really phenomenal. But we're all in touch, on the silly emails that went round, during the production still go around now, and there's obviously an Othello buddy list on everyone's emails, and they fire around. And then, of course, Ed Bennett, who played Rodrigo, ended up going on as Hamlet when the RSC production came to London, and we all knew about that, the day, because he knew, I think, that he did the last preview and then the opening night, didn't he?
Yeah.
And we all knew about it. We're all sending him.
We're speaking to Ed actually in a couple of weeks.
Are you?
Yeah, because he
ask him about because we had Ed was in the other. There's only 2 dressing rooms at the Donmar, so Ed and Chiwetel and Michael were through with the girls with a curtain on a string across the middle of the room. They were in there, and me and all the other boys were in ours with Tom and Alistair, and and Tom had a playlist of tunes that became, you know, you get so habitual about what happens before a show. Everything's just, you got to have the same thing, and you know, you don't want to change anything just in case that's the thing that's going to jinx it. So we had this small playlist of tunes, and one of them was Coldplay's "Fix You," right? And it was chanted in an anthemic sort of way in our dressing room. And every night Bennett would come around and go, "Fucking wankers!" He hated it. He'd always give us a really bad time about this rendition of "Fix You," which he thought was really girly, you know.
Really musical
And then,
theatre.
so the day after he went on as Hamlet here in London, the day after he opened, I texted him. I went, "Bet you listened to it, didn't you? Last night. I bet you listened to Fix You." And he just texted me back saying he had. He had done. He couldn't help it. No, just in case.
You find the rituals, don't you? And you can't let
do.
them go.
Totally, yeah.
Even if you're not.
And you can't not do it.
No, that's right.
Otherwise
that is one of the difficult things about, and it's interesting. So Ed and I open the play. We come on and we open the play. There's a scene between Iago and Rodrigo at the very beginning. We burst on. We're in the middle of an argument. So we had to do a kind of improvisation in the corridor backstage, and then the stage management would come in, and they would say, "Ready for you." So we would start this silly improvise. You know, it was often silly, and then they'd open the door. We'd burst on. So just so it got our blood up, and we were in the middle of something. It felt like in the middle of something, and not that we were starting the speech. And every night before that, I'd be pacing around doing bits of speeches, lines here, there, running through dialogue. Because I've always done that, you know. But I can't do all of it because it's huge. The part it would take me an hour and a half. So I'm only doing bits. And one night Ed said, "Don't do it. Don't run through any dialogue before you go on, because we've been running for a while now." He said, "You don't need to." And I went, "Oh, I have to." What? None? And Ed never did. Ed would walk on stage and start saying his lines for the first time that day because he knows them, and he knows them, and he doesn't need to go through them first. But I spent quite a lot of energy and time before each performance going through dialogue that I do know. Of course I do know, because there's bits on stage every night that I haven't run through before. Yeah. But to get me not to do it was really hard, and I tried before a matinee once. But it just kind of scared me, and
Once
I thought I just need to do it.
Yeah.
I need to do it. I'm not somebody that can just go, "Oh, here we go."
Are you someone who's had that actor's dream that we all have, I guess, probably the walking out and?
Oh yeah, nothing coming out.
Yeah.
I've had it for real. I mean, I've had it for real. Never mind the dream. I'd ride in a song during a song in Guys and Dolls with Jenna Russell.
Right.
Going, "I'll know when my love comes along. I'll know then and there." And it was gone. I mean, just nothing. But Grandage had come backstage before, and he went, "We've got 200 of the Donmar trustees in tonight. 200 patrons of the Donmar Theatre were in the stalls." And I was like, "Great." And he said, would you mind having a chat with them afterwards? I went, "Of course. It'd be lovely. We'll have them on stage." And then cut to, I'm on stage singing, and I dried. I went, "Ah, no, then and there," and I just shit myself.
And
it was gone.
Did you do?
It wasn't even there was no pre-warning or.
You didn't even have that moment. Like,
no, it wasn't like, because some people dry because they start worrying about drying. They go, "Oh, what if I can't remember that word? What is that word? What's the word?"
Yeah.
Just
and of
power
course,
cut.
you've just got to not do that. You've got to not do that. But I dried, and then the thing about drying in a musical is that there's the band
They
are
carry
playing,
on.
and they can't stop and come back, so they just keep playing. And the conductor shit himself and went, and was he couldn't remember what it was. You know, I was looking to him going. So I started making stuff up. "I like to look at your face. I like it a lot." And Jenna Russell turned with her back to the audience. I'll never forget her look. She kind of went. There was just horror and fear in her expression. God bless her. And eventually, as we came back round to the front, maybe they just thought it was some kind of weird syncopation. I was out. I mean, I was like half a bar behind the orchestra, or they were half a bar in front of me, or whatever. It was nasty. And then he managed to bring us in, the conductor, at the end. and we met in our beautiful harmony at the end of the song. And I when I got off stage eventually after the end of that scene, I went in my dressing room, and there was no colour in my face anymore. I was completely grey, like I'd been involved in a car accident. I mean, I looked like I'd been in some kind of horrible, which I had been in a horrible incident.
I was going to say, I remember you on stage and a friend of mine died, and literally his whole face went literally his lips blended in with his face, and I was like,
awful.
And then I realised it because nothing came out. And they sort of look at you as if to go,
no, you're on your own, that's it.
Yeah.
Forget it.
Oh, it's a shocker.
But then didn't you have that thing like the next day when you get to that point?
No, I had it for weeks. I reindulged
sort of getting
my
back
fear.
on the horse kind of
I had it bad, and eventually I went to Douglas Hodge and said, I'm so scared because it happened. You know what we all fear actually happened to me, and it wasn't like I'd been thinking about something else, or obviously I lost my concentration, but I wasn't aware of it happening, and so it felt so random and
like it could happen again.
So it could happen again. And he kind of had a long chat with me, Douglas, and he said, I think what it is you want to know it'll never ever happen again. And you can't. The truth of the matter is it's live theatre, and these things do sometimes happen, and you have to kind of embrace it, or else in order to go on, you have to come to terms with that can happen, so that you can then go forward. Otherwise, you're just living with the fear of it happening again. And he was right. Once I kind of thought, yeah, he is right. And generally, these things are recoverable, and very rarely do people notice. I think in the theatre, the audience are in a kind of wrapped in a magic that they're not inside your head, and in your head it is.
Everyone knows
that it's the biggest, and then time stands
10 minutes.
Still. The silence can last for an eon. Oh, it's nasty.
And then you ask people afterwards, and like, oh no, I didn't.
Oh yeah.
Didn't know.
Sometimes it's quite electric, that moment. Yeah, but I wouldn't like to ever be in that situation again. But then, there you go. Who knows?
One thing that comes up that's not really necessary to do with Shakespeare is but that does come up is what do you find is like the hardest aspect of having a career as an actor?
Yeah, it's come up actually.
It comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Well, there's lots of things that are difficult about it.
From a younger actor's perspective, people that are coming into the industry that.
Well, there's different. I think the hardest thing about film acting is, is feeling that you've got the space and the time to work, to act, because it's such a technical, expensive business, and it very often you very often feel afterwards that you could have done it much, much better, and you often can do it much better before in a rehearsal or in your trailer or whatever. And on set, you have to be quite strong to not let the pressure of the movie screw you up. And but I always think that's all people are going to see in the cinema. Of course the camera works can be poetic and beautiful, and the lighting can be great, and the costumes and the set and whatever, but if the acting sucks, that's all there is. It's just not very good acting. Whereas if there's great acting and everything else is great, then you've got a masterpiece. So it's important I always say to people, you have the right to kind of demand that. You've got the right to ask for that time, and if you feel that there's noise, people are talking, or people are walking around, people are you want to move on, and you think you've got a better take, you've got the right always to ask, not to have a big fit, but to ask, can it be quiet over there, and can people not walk around, and can I have another take? I think you should always have the right to do that. But it's difficult if you're inexperienced and to feel that, but it is true. And the toughest thing about having a career is what I think everybody else's preconceptions are quite difficult to ignore, but they're important to ignore in a way. I think you can have a really fantastic career, but people in a glossy magazine will assume that unless you're living Jude Law's life, or unless you're living, that you're not. I think we can all have amazing careers as long as we're exploring what makes us happy and playing the kind of parts that we like to play. And I've worked with great actors who are playing a day on something, or small part on stage or whatever, but they're great actors and they can be completely satisfied and happy. And as I am in my work, I think we can find some kind of. The assumption is that, I don't know what I'm trying to say really. I just think that it's the acting's the great stuff. The bottom line, I suppose, is that the acting is great. Whatever you're doing, whether you're on stage in the Donmar or you're in a blockbuster movie or a small independent movie, the acting is the great bit, and everything else is kind of, because it's quite difficult. Most actors don't, are out of work, don't get paid very much. Certainly don't get paid very much in the theatre. It's quite a hard life, but the acting's great, and so that's got to be why we do it,
Yeah. Great.
It's a bit silly, but anyway. I think it's true though. Great.
Amazing.
Thanks.
Is that
Thank
good?
you so
Yeah,
much.
it's absolutely
I hope it
fantastic.
made some